They said I wasn't allowed at Christmas this year, all because my own sister didn't want me there. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Leora Hayes, 27, and I grew up in a family where my sister, Blythe, always seemed to get everything she wanted. This Christmas, I was excited to join our family's annual party in our big, decorated home. The lights were sparkling, the tree smelled amazing, and I imagined laughing with my parents and nieces. But my excitement vanished when my mom told me I wasn't welcome because Blythe felt uncomfortable around me. I couldn't believe it. My parents, the people who promised to always support me, let my sister push me away. I felt hurt, angry, and humiliated. I left quietly, but I didn't want to stay down. I needed to show them my worth. I rented a small hall nearby, inviting friends who truly cared about me. I discovered Blythe had lied and manipulated our parents to keep me out. On Christmas night, I arrived at our house with friends and confidence. I stayed calm, letting everyone notice I had my own life, my own joy. When whispers started about Blythe's lies, I stayed composed. Parents were shocked. Blythe could barely respond. I realized revenge wasn't about anger, it was showing strength and dignity. That night, I celebrated quietly, surrounded by people who valued me. I didn't need approval from someone who tried to erase me. I learned betrayal hurts, but standing up for yourself and reclaiming respect is the best way to heal and win. I confronted my parents, Martin and Evelyn Hayes, in the living room, my heart pounding and chest tight. They looked uncomfortable, but their words cut deeper than I expected. Blythe feels uncomfortable around you, my mother said softly, as if that explained everything. I froze, trying to process the disbelief and hurt that washed over me. A holiday meant for laughter and warmth suddenly felt cold and distant. How could my own family treat me like this? My father avoided my eyes, and my mother's tone left no room for argument. Shock turned into a heavy ache in my chest. I had always thought Christmas was a time to belong, to celebrate together, but now I felt unwanted in my own home. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a sharp, unexpected betrayal that left me questioning my place in the family. I tried to speak, to ask why, to defend myself, but the words lodged in my throat. The room felt smaller, suffocating, and I realized no amount of reasoning would change their minds tonight. The decorations, the lights, the cheerful music, all of it mocked me silently. I turned away, forcing myself to remain calm even as tears threatened to fall. Every step toward the door felt like leaving a piece of my heart behind. I felt invisible, a shadow in a space that should have felt like home. The holiday joy I had anticipated dissolved, leaving only hurt, confusion, and a growing sense that I needed to reclaim my dignity somehow. This Christmas, I learned betrayal can come from the people you trust most, and the pain of being cast aside can ignite a determination to rise stronger than before. Growing up, Blythe always seemed to glide through life effortlessly. Our parents, Martin and Evelyn, showered her with praise for the smallest achievements, while my successes were quietly acknowledged at best. I remember the science fair in 5th grade, Blythe's project won first place, and the celebration lasted for days. When I won an essay contest that same week, the congratulations were polite but brief, almost as if my victory didn't matter. Birthday parties were no different. Blythe received extravagant gifts, special outings, and constant attention. I often got hand-me-downs and hurried acknowledgments before my parents returned to fussing over her. Every achievement, every moment of recognition, seemed reserved for her alone. I learned early that being me meant being in the shadows, quietly cheering while Blythe stood in the spotlight. Even family trips reflected the imbalance. My opinions were dismissed, my ideas overlooked, while Blythe's whims shaped the itinerary. I began to feel invisible, as though my presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. Over time, the resentment built quietly inside me, a simmering anger I never expressed. Moments of favoritism were small, but they added up. A whispered compliment to Blythe here, a missed opportunity for me there, it all sent a clear message: I was never enough. I loved my sister, yet a part of me longed for recognition, for fairness, for the chance to be seen as more than the other child. Looking back now, it's clear why I felt such pain this Christmas. Years of being overlooked and pushed aside had left a wound that reopened the moment my parents sided with Blythe. The sting of favoritism wasn't new, it had been quietly shaping my life for as long as I could remember. I walked out of my parents' house with a heavy heart, each step feeling like it dragged me further from the warmth I had hoped to feel. The streets were quiet, and the holiday lights blurred through tears I couldn't hold back. I felt a deep loneliness, as if the world around me had closed off while everyone else celebrated. Once home, I sank onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the hurt. The betrayal gnawed at me, sharper than I had expected. I loved my family, yet their decision made me feel invisible and unworthy. The laughter and cheer I had imagined seemed like someone else's world entirely. I began packing a small bag, intending to leave the city for the holidays. I needed space to think, to breathe, to escape the crushing disappointment. Every item I placed in the bag felt heavy, weighed down by the emotions I couldn't release. My anger simmered quietly beneath the sadness. It wasn't just sadness, it was humiliation. I had been cast aside for no reason I could control, and the favoritism toward Blythe stung more than words could describe. The unfairness of it all twisted in my chest, fueling a desire to prove myself, to reclaim the dignity they had denied me. I paused before zipping my bag, taking a shaky breath. My tears dried slowly, leaving a quiet determination in their place. I wouldn't let this break me completely. Beneath the heartbreak, a spark of resolve began to glow. I knew I needed to find a way to rise above the rejection and show my family, and myself, that I mattered just as much as anyone else. I spent the next few days quietly digging into the family's holiday plans, curious about what had led to my exclusion. I reviewed invitations, menus, and even the little details of decorations and seating arrangements. It didn't take long to notice patterns that didn't make sense, things that seemed deliberately designed to keep me out. As I looked closer, I found subtle changes in the budget and planning notes. Blythe had convinced my parents to upgrade the party, making it extravagant in ways that highlighted her control and influence. Every luxury item, every special treat, seemed chosen to impress guests while reminding me I wasn't welcome. I realized the exclusion wasn't accidental. Blythe had orchestrated it, manipulating our parents with charm and persuasion to secure her version of a perfect holiday. She had carefully positioned herself as the center, and I had been intentionally pushed aside. The thought made my stomach tighten, but it also sparked something else, a quiet, burning determination. The more I uncovered, the more I saw the full extent of her planning. There were lists of guests she wanted to impress, subtle notes on seating arrangements, and even gift selections that highlighted her supposed generosity. Everything was part of a show, and I had been written out of it. For the first time since the heartbreak, a plan began forming in my mind. If Blythe could manipulate my parents so easily, I could use her own tactics against her. I didn't need to confront her yet, there was power in observation, in patience. Quietly, I began plotting a way to reveal the truth and reclaim my place, not just at the party, but in a way that would make them all realize how wrong they had been. I found a small, charming hall a few blocks away, quiet enough to remain unnoticed but elegant enough to feel special. I booked it for Christmas Eve, keeping everything under the radar so my family wouldn't suspect a thing. I reached out to a few old family friends who had always treated me kindly, people who saw me for who I was rather than just Blythe's shadow. They agreed to come without hesitation, and their excitement lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Their support reminded me that I wasn't truly alone, and that others valued me beyond my family's favoritism. As I arranged the space, I focused on details that mattered, a warm atmosphere, simple but meaningful decorations, and a small festive meal. Everything was designed to feel inviting, calm, and joyful, the kind of gathering that showed thoughtfulness rather than extravagance. At the same time, I drafted a quiet strategy. I wouldn't confront Blythe or my parents directly yet. Instead, I would let subtle truths surface naturally, using the presence of genuine friends to highlight the contrast between my warm gathering and the rigid, showy family party. I imagined the looks on their faces if they realized that I had created a space full of authenticity and care, while Blythe's grand display was hollow beneath the surface. Even as I prepared, I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. For the first time in days, the holiday felt like an opportunity rather than a punishment. The plan was simple: create a small celebration filled with sincerity, let it speak for itself, and wait for the moment when my family could see the consequences of their favoritism without me needing to argue or plead. I arrived at the venue early, blending in with the staff by carrying a box of supplies. No one paid much attention to me, which was exactly what I needed. Moving quietly through the decorated rooms, I listened to the chatter around me, careful not to draw any eyes in my direction. Near the back hallway, I heard Blythe's voice before I even turned the corner. She was speaking loudly, almost proudly, as if she wanted everyone nearby to hear her. I paused behind a display of garland and listened. She talked about how she had guided our parents into certain choices, making sure the guest list stayed exactly the way she wanted it. She mentioned me by name, laughing about how simple it had been to convince them that my presence would disturb the mood. My stomach tightened, but I kept my breathing steady. I slipped my phone from my pocket, turned on the recorder, and held it low. I didn't need to see her to capture every word, her voice carried clearly. She continued bragging about how the evening would highlight her influence and how relieved she was that I wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. As I moved closer, I caught more details: how she had framed me as difficult, how she had exaggerated minor disagreements from the past, and how easily my parents had accepted her version of events. Each sentence painted a clearer picture of her intentions. I circled the room as if checking supplies, gathering additional comments from guests she had confided in. Some praised her planning, unaware of the manipulation behind it. Others repeated things she had told them about me, pieces I knew were twisted or untrue. By the time I stepped back outside, my phone held everything I needed, undeniable proof of her scheming, spoken in her own voice. As I stepped into a quieter corner of the venue to clear my head, I heard someone call my name softly. I turned to see Harlan, an older family friend I hadn't spoken to in years. His expression held concern, not judgment, and it surprised me enough to stop in my tracks. He told me he had noticed me moving around earlier and guessed why I was there. Before I could explain, he gently motioned for me to sit with him at an empty table away from the noise. His calm presence felt grounding, a rare comfort in a night filled with tension. Harlan didn't ask many questions. Instead, he shared his own observations. Over the years, he had seen patterns in Blythe's behavior, small moments where she twisted stories, claimed credit, or steered conversations to make herself look better. He said he had always admired my patience and wondered how I managed to stay kind despite being overshadowed so often. Hearing someone acknowledge what I had lived through made something inside me loosen. He didn't minimize my feelings, and that alone was more support than I had received from my own family in a long time. When I mentioned the evidence I had gathered, he nodded thoughtfully. He didn't push me toward confrontation. Instead, he suggested a different approach, one rooted in subtlety and composure. He advised me to let the truth reveal itself naturally, not through loud accusations but through calm presence and undeniable facts. People, he said, often see more than they admit, and giving them a chance to observe would shift their perception. His words gave me clarity. I didn't need to cause a scene, I simply needed to be steady and confident. With Harlan's guidance, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, quiet but powerful, ready for whatever came next. Christmas night arrived cold and quiet, the kind of evening where every light seemed sharper against the dark sky. I walked toward the house dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, chosen to project calm rather than draw attention. A few friends who had supported me all week followed behind, their presence steady and reassuring. We stopped near the entrance, where guests were already gathering. Laughter flowed from inside, but I didn't rush. I wanted to step in on my own terms. When we finally entered, the room didn't fall silent, yet I felt a shift, small glances, curious looks, a subtle ripple moving through the crowd. I stayed close to the edge of the room, greeting familiar faces without forcing myself into any circle. My friends blended in easily, chatting politely and giving me space to move with purpose. I kept my posture relaxed, my expression neutral, careful not to reveal the storm beneath my calm exterior. It didn't take long for my parents to notice me. My mother's eyes widened in surprise, while my father looked unsure how to react. Neither approached right away, and I didn't step toward them either. I wanted them to see me standing there, composed, unbothered, refusing to shrink. Then came the moment I had anticipated. Blythe entered from the dining area, glowing with confidence until her gaze landed on me. For a brief second, she froze. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. I didn't break eye contact, offering only a polite nod. I didn't need to speak. My presence was enough. I let the realization sink in, that I hadn't hidden, hadn't run, and certainly hadn't accepted the role she tried to assign me. Standing there among the guests, steady and self-assured, I began the quiet shift that would change the night. Dinner began with soft music and the clinking of glasses, the kind of setting Blythe always loved because it placed her at the center of attention. I took a seat with my friends at a side table, close enough for others to hear us but far enough to avoid forcing myself into the spotlight. As the meal progressed, my friends naturally slipped into conversations with nearby guests. They spoke kindly, but their stories carried a clear theme, moments they had witnessed over the years where I had been pushed aside or ignored, moments where Blythe had taken advantage of her position or twisted situations to suit herself. They didn't accuse her directly, they simply described what they had seen, letting the truth settle in the air like an uncomfortable echo. I watched quiet reactions ripple through the room. Some guests exchanged uncertain looks, as if piecing together things they had overlooked. Others listened more closely than before, their expressions shifting with realization. Even my parents grew still, glancing at Blythe with questions they hadn't dared ask earlier. Blythe sensed the shift. Her confidence dimmed, and she excused herself from the main table. I followed her into a small side hallway, the only place away from the noise. She turned sharply, her voice low and tense, asking why I had shown up. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told her she had underestimated everyone around her. That people were finally noticing the patterns she thought she had hidden. That her need to control every moment had exposed her more clearly than anything I could ever say. The realization hit her hard. Her expression wavered, pride giving way to fear and confusion. She wasn't facing a dramatic public scene, she was facing the truth she had built herself. Standing there, I felt the weight lift. This was the moment she finally saw the consequences of her actions, without me needing to shout or defend my worth. When Blythe and I stepped back into the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were quieter, glances sharper, and the confidence my sister carried so easily had slipped away. My parents watched us closely, their expressions tight with confusion and something else, embarrassment they could no longer hide. My mother's gaze moved from Blythe to me, searching for an explanation. My father looked down at his plate, clearly piecing together the stories he had overheard during dinner. Neither spoke, and their silence said more than any apology could. They were finally seeing the imbalance they had ignored for years. I kept my posture steady, refusing to let the tension pull me back into old patterns. I didn't raise my voice or seek validation. I simply remained calm, answering questions from nearby relatives with honesty and grace. My composure swept through the room, shifting the attention away from Blythe's usual charm. Meanwhile, Blythe couldn't mask her distress. She tried to rejoin conversations, but her attempts to steer discussions fell flat. Guests who once praised her so easily now responded with hesitation. She glanced at me repeatedly, hoping to regain control, but every effort only highlighted how fragile her influence had become. Extended relatives approached me quietly, offering warm words, gentle acknowledgments, and supportive smiles. A few even apologized for moments in the past when they had overlooked me without realizing the impact. Their recognition wasn't loud, but it was genuine, and each gesture restored a piece of confidence I thought I had lost. By the end of the evening, the contrast was undeniable. Blythe stood cornered by her own behavior, while I remained steady, gaining respect not through confrontation but through dignity. My family was witnessing the truth for themselves, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, clearly and without question. When the evening wound down, I stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The house behind me buzzed with fading conversations, but I no longer felt the sting of exclusion. I had walked into that party with steady confidence, and I was leaving with something far more valuable than an invitation. I was leaving with my dignity intact. As I crossed the driveway, I glanced back through the windows. Blythe stood alone near the dessert table, her posture stiff, her usual shine gone. Guests avoided her eyes, speaking in hushed tones, no longer impressed by the polished image she had tried so hard to create. Her plans for a flawless evening had dissolved quietly, replaced by the uneasy awareness that people finally saw the truth she'd spent years hiding. I didn't feel triumphant in a loud, gloating way. My victory came from restraint, from choosing calm over chaos, control over desperation. I hadn't needed to expose her with theatrics, her own behavior had done the work for me. Walking away, I realized that proving my worth wasn't about changing their minds, it was about standing tall even when they failed to see me. My parents' silence earlier had said enough. They had watched everything unfold, and for the first time, they couldn't deny how deeply the favoritism had shaped our lives. Whether they ever acknowledged it openly or not, the truth had settled in the room like a new, uncomfortable guest. I reached the street where my friends waited, their warm smiles proving I wasn't alone. I didn't need a seat at a table that had never been set for me in the first place. I could build my own celebrations, with people who valued me genuinely, without conditions or comparisons. And as I walked away, I knew I had reclaimed something far more important than a holiday. I had reclaimed myself. Leora stepped into the cool night air, letting the noise of the party fade behind her. She replayed every moment in her mind, not with anger, but with clarity. Betrayal had cut deeply, yet it had also pushed her to rediscover her own strength. She realized she didn't need approval from people who dismissed her worth. What mattered was the courage she showed when it counted. Standing up for herself wasn't just necessary, it was liberating. As she walked away, she understood that dignity reclaimed is more powerful than any insult thrown her way. Her experience became a reminder that betrayal doesn't define a person, how they rise afterward does. She left with her head high, hoping others who had felt sidelined by their own families would reflect on where true value comes from and choose themselves, too. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have stayed and forgiven them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.